means that the number one pick in the 2021 NBA draft goes to the Detroit Pistons.
Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft? Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft?
Basketball!
Select Isaiah Stewart.
The Detroit Pistons select Killian Hayes.
Saddiq, that was absolutely sensational.
I don't know what went into that process. I met the criteria to be selected, but I wasn't.
From long range. Oh! Yes!
Detroit basketball! Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano, and joining me, as always, are my two co-hosts who assuredly are calm, collected, totally not impacted by the last 4 hours or so of trade deadline talk, Jasper Apollonia and Aaron Johnson. Fellas, how are we doing on trade deadline Thursday?
You know, there's so much to get into. I don't want to waste any time. I'm here. I'm ready. I'm glad all three of us are here to discuss a very, very
Aaron is present
day. So yeah, let's just do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I'm going to open off by saying I'm really disappointed. I mean, the Pistons just traded away one of their most consistent volume three-point shooters, a guy hitting 72% of his shots around the rim. He had an effective field goal percentage of 61% on catch and shoot jumpers. That's right. I'm devastated they traded Kevin Knox. It really hurts.
I knew there was something had to be coming. And I had a feeling it was something like that. So we're going to get into all of the massive news surrounding the forward that everybody knew was going to be traded before the deadline. Oh, wait, no, that's Bojan Bogdanovic. We're going to get into the other wing that we all thought was maybe not going to be traded, but maybe was, but did anyway somehow for a really interesting, weird package. But before we get into all that and more, I'd like to thank our sponsor this week's episode, BetOnline. And BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting this season. Everything from NFL playoffs to pro and college basketball, UFC, MMA, and more. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. With live betting options, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. BetOnline is truly the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite leagues and events. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to join. Receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit as long as you use the promo code BLEAV. That's BLEAV. Again, that's BLEAV. Join, receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit at betonline.ag. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, no time to waste. Let's get right into it. It is the most eventful day of probably the entire NBA season, which is a little sad and a little cool, but it's also what Twitter was definitely built for, just constantly refreshing. I think my phone was at 10% by the time the deadline actually ended. Trade deadline Thursday. Pistons have had a lot of names in talks. We've talked about a lot of them. Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel, Bojan Bogdanovic, Saddiq Bey. They had a lot of balls in the air. So Pistons didn't end up trading Bogdanovic, but they did end up trading Saddiq Bey. And got to tell you, the initial reaction to that was startling. Going to Golden State for James Wiseman. It ended up being Saddiq Bey to Atlanta for 5 second-round picks going to Golden State, but the return for Detroit is the same. That would be 21-year-old center James Wiseman, who was the number 2 overall pick in the 2020 NBA draft. And he has not particularly panned out, is a light way of putting it. I know we have a lot of thoughts about this, trading Saddiq Bey for essentially a player that may or may not be an NBA level player. Right now he's not. Hasn't shown that he is. Trading Saddiq Bey for the potential of James Wiseman when you already have Jalen Duren is a difficult, questionable move by this front office. But we're going to get into the front office thing. I want to do that in a separate topic. I just want to talk about this trade in a vacuum and what it means for this season and the immediate future, because I don't know how long of a leash James Wiseman's going to have. This is going to be his second team. And to be quite honest, it might be his last team, depending on how he's playing. So let's stick right now to avoiding the Troy Weaver discourse, so to speak. Let's talk about just this trade. Jasper, I want to start with you. I'll let Aaron continue to put his thoughts together. I can actually see the steam pouring out of his ears from Cleveland. So I'm going to let him simmer. I'm going to start with you. Initial reactions to Golden State trading James Wiseman to the Pistons, essentially in a 3-team deal with Saddiq Bey going to the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, I mean, first off, good move letting Aaron wait until after, because when you got a stew cooking, baby, it takes patience and time. I don't like this return, and it's specifically because of James Wiseman. It's not because I think that Saddiq Bey should have garnered some huge return. I even said it last night when the Knicks traded for Josh Hart. I thought that right there, the package for Cam Reddish and a second-round pick, I thought that right there told you exactly what you were going to be getting for Saddiq Bey. Because Josh Hart is a player of comparable quality to Saddiq. Bey's a bad defender. He's shooting 34.6% from three over his last 900 attempts. You knew like a Luke Kennard type turn might be possible, but honestly, I don't even think this is comparable to the Luke Kennard return. I mean, really, Wiseman's just a bad player, straight up. And this is why I don't like the trade. He has not been good at any point in his playing career in the NBA. It's really funny that Troy Weaver says he values rebounding, but then he makes trades for players like Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman, who are positionally awful rebounders. Wiseman's numbers look respectable on the surface level, but he actually only snags 49% of his rebounds that are near him. That's 68th out of 80 qualified players. He can't protect the rim. He averages 1 block per 36 to 5.4 fouls. He has the second worst defensive field goal percentage of any player in the NBA with over 20 games played this season. Oh, you know who's number 3, by the way? Take a quick guess. Please. This is not rhetorical. Who do you think's third?
It's a real question. As in third worst?
Yeah, who's third worst?
In rim protection. Noel.
Defensive field goal percentage of any player in the NBA who's played 20 games this season. Who's the third worst?
I'm guessing he's on Detroit.
Yeah, he is. It's Marvin Bagley.
Ooh.
Marvin Bagley.
The guy that I forgot about.
Yeah, so the other big guy that you now have on your team as well, who also is a power forward, which, by the way, according to Mark Spears, is apparently where they're thinking about starting James Wiseman next to Jalen Duren. So whether he's with your starter in Jalen Duren or if he's with your backup in Marvin Bagley, you're talking about a horrible, horrible defenders. The Warriors have a defensive rating of 113.6 on the year. With James Wiseman on the court, it's 123.2. His overall on-off splits this year are negative 21.6 points per possession for Warriors. And this is not a dominant Warriors team. This is a Warriors team that is fighting for a playoff spot. He's injury prone. He's already had a meniscus surgery. He's already had a shoulder surgery. And when you're talking about a guy who you're bringing in because he is supposedly a great athlete and a good rebounder, he's not a good rebounder. He can't protect the rim. His athleticism is not what it was when he first came into the league. He can finish at the rim. That's about it. But you already have guys in Marvin Bagley and in Jalen Duren who do that already. So my question is, what are you getting out of this? What are you getting out of this? Other than we traded for a number 2 former overall pick that I used to like.
I think that's the big question. What are they getting out of this?
I don't see it at all for Detroit. It doesn't make sense for me. On a team that already is lacking wing depth, you've now traded away. You have Bogdanovich and you have Livers and, maybe Hamidou Diallo. Those are your wings for the rest of the year. And now you're looking at wings. 2.5 wings. And now you're looking at going into next year, you need to make a splash in free agency with one of Harrison Barnes or Jeremy Grant, or you need to draft your guy there if you're not getting Victor Wembanyama, or you're going to have to trade for one, which is going to take up more assets that you already don't have. So, yeah, for me, I don't like this trade. Aaron, you've been simmering, you've been stewing over there.
It's going to be a spicy stew.
Yeah, let's let the top off of this pressure cooker. Come on, man. Because I know, for as upset as I am at this trade, I can only imagine you're far more disappointed.
I like how we've pegged Aaron as the angry guy.
Yeah, I know, right? That's usually my purview, but hey, I'm happy to pass it off.
It's just an abysmal move. I mean, I don't see how you paint it in a way that suggests it's anything other than that. Talking about stats, let's take a couple looks at James Wiseman stats. Using 538's Raptor stat, which is an all-encompassing stat. If you listen to the Old Man and the Three, JJ Redick's podcast, they use this stat a lot when discussing players. It's an all-encompassing stat, looks at plus minus, on-off rating, things of that nature. Ranking 404 NBA players who have played a minimum of over 200 minutes this season. James Wiseman ranks 401st in the league with a minus 8.2 overall Raptor rating. The only 3 players ranking worse than him are Josh Christopher, Day'Ron Sharpe, and Simone Fontecchio. He has a negative 5.2 plus minus, worst on Golden State's roster by almost an entire point. There is no evidence that he has been an NBA player in his 3-year career so far. There's no evidence that he can stay healthy to try to develop into a meaningful NBA player in his career so far. And his fit with the Detroit Pistons is utterly abysmal. If you want to add another center, even though this team has this, it's funny how the narrative flips, because it's always, the Pistons have so many centers. But then this trade happened today, and it was, the Pistons needed a backup center because Isaiah Stewart isn't really a backup center, and Marvin Bagley really isn't a backup center, and Jalen Duren's a rookie. And by the way, they still have Nerlens Noel. They didn't move him, so they still have him on the roster as well. But they really needed another center. It's just it's a mind-boggling decision, because I don't have a problem with wanting to trade Saddiq Bey, with saying, okay, we got to pay him next year. This isn't necessarily a guy that we want to invest in long term. We need to try to move him. But to get a guy that has done way less than Saddiq Bey in his career, has proven way less in his career than Saddiq Bey, who is also going to be up for a contract extension at the end of next year, puts you in the same exact position that you were in had you just kept Saddiq Bey and eventually just let him walk as a restricted free agent and go sign a sheet elsewhere. Now you're stuck with a guy that has no track record in the league. It just makes no sense whatsoever. And I know, Mike, that you said, let's not bring Troy Weaver into this, but I can't not mention this. Troy Weaver was high on James Wiseman in the 2020 draft, in his first draft with the team. It was reported that they would have taken him with the first pick in the draft. Troy Weaver likes his guys, decides he likes his guys, and I guess just doesn't look at any of the film that suggests maybe these guys actually aren't it. They actually aren't the right players, because 3 years later, he's moving a player that should at least have some sort of value as an asset. I mean, Saddiq Bey, since the start of the new year, has averaged 16.7 points per game, just under 6 rebounds, almost 2 assists per game, shooting 41.5% from the field, just under 39% from the three-point line. Like, he's been a good player with his usage going up. They're mixing him in into the starting lineup a little bit more. He's played a significant role off the bench. Like, he's been a good player since the start of 2023, which I know the issue with him has been consistency and streakiness. So I understand maybe you don't fully buy into those numbers. But there was no evidence of James Wiseman being a good player. And just because you believed in him 3 years ago when, oh, by the way, that was your first draft with this organization, and it's looking like you just missed out on all 3 of your first round picks that you made in that draft. You want to call this, the so-and-so fourth one. It's just going to be another miss. I mean, I don't know what's really going through the mind that says we think we can develop him. You didn't develop any of those prospects from that draft class. Why go get another one that has no record of being anything worthwhile? The fit is terrible. If they start him over Jalen Duren, Troy Weaver should be fired on the spot. He won't be. They already signed him to an extension a couple weeks ago, which is why I was saying a month ago, hey, maybe that was just a little early. Like, let's maybe slow a roll a little bit. I don't think the track record says this guy is necessarily someone they should be locking in prematurely. And now we go into what should have been a significant deadline for this team, one way or the other. They were a part of John Collins' trade talk. Supposedly they wanted draft capital to take back a guy who is making, double of what Marvin Bagley's making, but is actually a valuable NBA player, unlike Marvin Bagley, who Troy Weaver traded for and then outbid himself for in the offseason following to sign him for a $13 million deal for 3 straight years. It's just, this is what this team is. These are the types of moves that are going to continue to happen. These quote unquote buy lows, taking chances on guys who haven't figured it out yet in the league. It really hasn't worked for the Pistons once during Troy Weaver's tenure. I think the closest chance of that potentially ever working was getting Hamidou Diallo, who is a 6'5" wing that plays like a center, and because he cannot shoot, he's not a smart defender, just can finish at the rim because he's so fast and so explosive. All the other buy low moves have turned into absolutely nothing. Dennis Smith Jr., let's see, who else? There was Dennis Smith Jr., Marvin Bagley.
Jaleel Okafor,
Josh
Jackson.
Josh Jackson was a buy low signing. Neither of those worked out.
Trey Lyles. You can keep going, Aaron.
I don't remember if Troy Weaver traded for Svi Mykhailiuk originally or if that was the previous.
No, he was already on the team.
He was already on the team. Okay. This is the same guy that, traded Bruce Brown for
nothing.
For Musa from the Nets, who got waived and was essentially just to get rid of Bruce Brown, who's now a contributor on the top seed in the Western Conference. Traded Luke Kennard and 4 second-round picks to get the first-round pick to take Saddiq Bey. Traded Christian Wood and locked the Pistons' first-round pick up for the foreseeable future and protections so that he could draft Isaiah Stewart, another guy who probably doesn't make it to his second contract with the Pistons.
No, I mean, Aaron, you're
a bad trade.
You're dead on. You're dead on, and you know what? And you said it too. You can try to justify this trade by saying that Detroit needs a backup center, but let's really be real. Isaiah Stewart at the 4 is not working. It's not working. He had some success for a few weeks when he got hot from 3, but look, he's backed it down to 30% from deep on the season. Teams are not respecting his shot. It's opening up some drives for him, but ultimately it takes him away from the basket offensively and defensively, which negates his 2 best qualities as a player, which are physical interior defense and rebounding on both ends. So that's not going the way they wanted it to. I'm pretty much out on that experiment. I just don't know what the guy is at this point. He's not a power forward. He's not a starting center. But now you have a guy in James Wiseman, too, who I'm seeing it. It's the same as Stewart, same as Marvin Bagley. Is this guy a center? Is he a power forward for you now? What is the plan there? And you can say, hey, he, high upside, former number 2 overall pick, still a good athlete. But what about Detroit's organization? What about their coaching staff is making you think that they can develop players better than the Golden State Warriors can? What exactly there is it shows you that?
Exactly.
Isaiah Livers?
Exactly.
I mean, look, who has improved? Is Saddiq Saddiq Bey better than he was his rookie year? No. Is Isaiah Stewart better than he was his rookie year? I don't really think so either. Maybe a little bit, but it's like a natural progression. It's not like he's taken a huge leap here. It's brutal. And you know what? And now it's funny too, because you're seeing all these stories not all these stories. There's one specific story that came out immediately after this trade happened, talking about how, Bey hasn't actually been a really good fit with his team because of his playing style and it's causing some locker room rifts. Hey, where the hell were those articles before the trade deadline? Where have these articles been the last 2 years? Mm-hmm. I have a nit to pick with the media there because it's like they love Saddiq Bey. Saddiq Bey is great. He's a part of this core. And then the second he's gone, there's all these little things that come out about him.
Yeah, funny.
Where the hell have you been as a beat writer? Aren't you a reporter? You're sitting on this stuff until what? Until he's no longer on the team? Until it doesn't hurt your access? Pathetic. I think that's pathetic. And you know what? That's the type of stuff that flies in Detroit. Unfortunately, it doesn't fly in some other cities, but it does fly in Detroit. And I saw that and I was like, because there's no way you have that article up unless you've already had these ideas written out beforehand. You don't have it up in half an hour. You know what I mean? You've had this information. You've had these talks and you've been sitting on it. So I think that's pathetic. And I just wanted to get that out there. We can keep moving, but that really pissed me off.
And now this idea that James Wiseman is going to come in and start for this team, just to go back, like you said, Jasper, like if the Golden State Warriors couldn't develop him, what tells you that the Detroit Pistons and this coaching staff that has a horrid track record of development so far in their 3 years together, what tells you that they're going to be able to develop this guy? If it couldn't work in Golden State, if he couldn't figure it out in Golden State, playing with the best players in the league, the best organization in the league, the best coaching staff in the league, how is it supposed to change here? I just don't understand the thought process behind that. And again,
I mean, Aaron, the reason,
fine, but you have to trade him for something that actually matters. If you were just going to trade him for essentially nothing, then just let him walk, because you need guys that can play minutes at the small forward spot right now. Their wings right now are Bojan Bogdanovic, Isaiah Livers, who, I hope he stays healthy. I think he can be a contributing NBA player, but he really hasn't stayed healthy throughout his career. And then Hamidou Diallo, who is the funkiest quote-unquote small forward that I can think of right now, just with the way that he plays.
No, he's a shooting guard that's best played at power forward. That's Hamidou Diallo. So, I mean, and look, you even talk about like the Wiseman pick to the Warriors, how he didn't work out there. The reason they picked him was because he was, on paper, the perfect player for them. That was always the thing with the Warriors teams. You were like, well, yeah, they're amazing, but man, if they just had that guy who could rebound a little bit better and rim protect a little bit and catch lobs, wow, how much better would they be? Like, we're talking about a guy who's supposed to be tailor-made for that roster, and he couldn't work out there. They couldn't develop him there. He couldn't stay healthy there. What about this organization makes you think anything is going to be different? And especially when you have players in Stewart and Duren and even Bagley, because you paid him, who should be ahead of Wiseman in the pecking order right now. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm also on the podcast.
Sorry, Mike.
No. This is all good stuff. I've been thinking about this trade for a while, trying to figure out what exactly the calculus was. And I mean, it seems like they value Wiseman as having higher upside than Saddiq Bey. They obviously knew they weren't going to pay him, Saddiq, that is, when he was eligible. I agree. I'm reading the article right now about how his style of play was starting to wear on some in Detroit's organization. His rookie year was his best year when he was primarily just catch and shoot type of player. We have seen him try to become more to little effect and lower efficiency, but he was trying to do more. And it's just a really bizarre, like if you're not going to pay Saddiq, and clearly this information reached the league circles because his value was apparently the same as Gary Payton II, who went for the 5 first-round picks that Golden State acquired.
Second round picks.
What did I say?
You said first.
Oh,
I wish.
Second round pick. 5.
I wish. I wish.
That changes the whole trade.
Yeah, that would.
Yeah, 5 second-round picks. So that was his value, was 5 seconds, which was a theme apparently because Milwaukee did the same thing for Jay Crowder, which makes you think Jay Crowder has the same value as Saddiq Bey.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of this really adds up. But to add another center, by the way, I don't think that you can play Wiseman and Jalen Duren together. I don't see how that's even going to happen in any way. You already talked about James Wiseman's on-off numbers. His splits are atrocious. He actually has a worse efficiency differential this year than last year. It's minus 22.8 points scored per 100 possessions. He has an expected win of minus 41. I just don't understand. I mean, the only thing on cleaning the glass that is a positive is that he's getting to the line more. But he's not a particularly good free throw shooter. I think he's at like 70%.
He's like not a good free throw shooter. So
yeah, he's only a like a 65, 70% ish free throw shooter. So it's like, what the hell's happening here? Yeah, I can't really make heads or tails over why they made this trade.
Well,
if I just don't know. I know for a fact the Cavaliers would have given up more for Saddiq Bey. I mean, his league-wide value could not have possibly been this low. I find it impossible. He's a wing. He's 23 years old. He has a history of being able to shoot the basketball. I find it impossible that his value was James Wiseman, who has played, according to cleaning the glass, he's played under 1,000 minutes in his career at the NBA level and has done very poorly in those sub 1,000 minutes.
The Pistons went from wanting a first-round pick for Saddiq Bey 1 week ago to trading him for a guy that's ranked 401st in the league. 450 players in the league, whatever, on regular roster spots. 401st in an all-encompassing stat called Raptor that's used around the league in analytic departments across the league, across the NBA, ranked 401st. No numbers support him being a valuable NBA player in any sort of role. And they went from wanting a first-round pick for Saddiq Bey to trading him for statistically one of the worst players in the entire league.
And Aaron, and that's even more part of it. It's like you can't even. There's nothing you can point to him being a good player. There's nothing. He is a decent rim finisher. That is basically all you can say about him. He does not do anything else well on the floor. He's not a good rebounder. He's a horrible defender. What point is there to this? And like you said, Mike, you don't think you can play him with Jalen Duren. Well, then who do you play him with? Isaiah Stewart? Well, I mean, Marvin Bagley? What is the goal here? And also, if the point of trading Saddiq Bey was that you didn't want to have to pay him, well, now you have two options with James Wiseman. Either you don't pay him and let him walk, in which case you might as well have just let Saddiq Bey walk, or better yet, have traded him for 5 second-round picks, or you now have to re-sign James Wiseman, of which I have absolutely zero confidence in the Pistons organization doing at a good price, because they've just shown it last year with Marvin Bagley that they have no idea how much centers should be paid. And it's not just with Marvin Bagley. It's a long running thing. And I'm at this point, I don't trust Troy Weaver whatsoever when it comes to signing big men. Signed Jahlil Okafor, who sucked and everyone knew it. Signed Mason Plumlee, who is decent, but that deal ended up being a negative asset for Detroit because they had to attach a pick to him in order to offload him. Took Luka Garza, who sucked and everyone knew it. Signed Trey Lyles, who sucked and everyone knew it, and then got traded for Marvin Bagley, who sucked and everyone knew it. Then they re-signed him to one of the worst contracts in the league that no one else was competing for. The Kelly Olynyk sign you can defend in hindsight because it ended up being, the crucial part of the Bojan Bogdanovic trade. But the signing to begin with was an overpay as well. I mean, really, other than the Isaiah Stewart selection and the Jalen Duren selection, has he done anything with the big men that he's been tasked to get? We're looking at a lot of them right now. There's been, 8, 9? Only 2 of them are even good. The rest are just horrible, and he overpaid all of them. So I don't trust him, and the fact that he says he loved Wiseman coming out of college makes me trust him even less. So, yeah, right now, my confidence level in Troy Weaver, I really didn't think that, trading Saddiq Bey for a reclamation project was going to have to make me really reconsider how I think about Troy Weaver's entire tenure here. But I kind of have to at this point because the roster right now doesn't make any more sense than it did 3 years ago.
Two things.
You don't have wings.
Two things I want to add to that. You just went over all of his big man evaluation when the Pistons could have just re-signed, extended Christian Wood, signed him to a contract in free agency rather than trading him and locking up our first round pick in protection hell for the next 2, is it still 2 more years or whatever, so that they could draft Isaiah Stewart. They could have just re-signed Christian Wood, who's better than all of the big men that you just listed. And also
except for Duren.
Well, except for Duren in the long term, you would imagine. And then also, the Pistons were reportedly interested in John Collins, or had talks with the Atlanta Hawks about John Collins, but were unwilling to take him and his contract back unless they were given significant draft capital with it. That was in a report. So you're telling me that because John Collins makes $25 million, you need significant draft capital to take him on. But you would pay Kelly Olynyk $13 million a year. You would pay Marvin Bagley $13 million a year. You would take on all these way worse players and overpay them. But John Collins, who at least seemingly has a little bit more respect around the league, more potential, has had actual good campaigns, good stats in the league, you wouldn't take him. And he's also not, he's still a younger player in the league. You can see him playing with this team long term, but you couldn't take him on. And he's actually a 4. So it's not like you're pigeonholing him into playing the 4 like you're going to do with James Wiseman or Jalen Duren, like you've done with Isaiah Stewart, and none of those are going to work or have worked. It's just the decision making. It sounds so naive because we're sitting here and talking about this like we're smarter than this guy, and this guy doesn't know ball, and we really know ball, and this is how we do it. But sometimes it just comes down to like, you don't even understand the thought process behind it. Like, the move might not work, but in hindsight, you can look at the intention, you can look at the idea behind it and say, okay, it didn't work, but this is why it happened. This is why he did it. You can't look at this. You can't look at all of these moves in the past and say, this is why he did it. This is what the intention was. Even if it didn't work out with Isaiah Stewart, even if it didn't work out with Mason Plumlee, this is why he did it. Because there's no reason why Mason Plumlee should have had to have the 37th pick in the draft attached to him just to trade back 20 spots to get off Plumlee's, $8 million? Like it was a $19 million, $20 million contract.
And he did that so he could give $13 million to Kelly Olynyk.
Exactly. It's just, it's a pattern. It's a bad pattern. It's like at some point you've got to recognize the pattern and say, maybe this is a problem. Okay. It's just sometimes it's naive. Other times it's just like, plain as day, let's point it out.
We need to have an intervention for Troy. Troy, we're here because we love you, but you have a problem. You have a center problem and you need help. Look, and I also want to say this, and Mike, I want to get back to you as well, but I I think it's a good thing you said there. It's like, we're not necessarily coming on here and saying, oh, hey, this is everything's a disaster. Troy Weaver's an idiot. We're so much smarter than him. Look, the fact of the matter is they still have Jalen Duren. They still have Jaden Ivey. They still have Cade Cunningham. They have another top 5 pick coming their way. They have cap space this upcoming offseason where they can go after really, really capable wings in Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Grant. But if you don't get those guys and you don't get the guy you want in the draft, well, now you're in real, real trouble. And I think that's more of what we're trying to get across here, is that the moves in a vacuum don't add up. They don't make sense, and they don't seem to have a real long-term goal in mind. I don't know where he's going with this. I don't see how the roster can be filled out to a place where you can actually compete for playoff spots, unless, of course, you're throwing basically a max comp, like $30 million plus a year at Jeremy or Harrison Barnes this offseason. I don't know how else you're going to do it. It's either that or you're going to have to be trading a lot of draft capital for a non-all-star. You know, like Mikal Bridges, not an all-star. OG Anunoby, not an all-star. Both of those guys required huge, huge returns. OG didn't get moved because it was 3 first-round picks. Mikal Bridges, what it took for him was Kevin frickin' Durant. So, like, we're not even talking all-star level guys. A step below that requires an insane amount of capital in order to acquire. So the way I'm looking at it right now is basically if he strikes out on those 2 guys in free agency, I have no clue what they are going to do next year. They're going to be terrible. Right. They're still going to be horrible. And it doesn't matter if you have Cade Cunningham.
No. Well, it wasn't really mattering this year anyway. That's the thing that irks me. And what I don't understand is that you have a lot of talk about, and really by a lot of, I mean, Zach Lowe said on his podcast that the Pistons are planning on being competitive and next year is play in or bust type of mentality, which is fine. It should be. We've talked about this on the podcast. Next year should be the year that if they're picking top 8 or top 6 again, it's a massive failure of a year. Huge failure. And to the point where we're hiring the Pistons are looking at hiring a new head coach and a new general manager if they're picking in the top 8, maybe even the top 10, depending on how ugly things get. And the East is probably not going to be that good next year based on all the moves that have just happened. If they're this bad again, you're going to be looking at a new front office and you're going to be looking at a new coaching staff. But what I don't understand is, and maybe Zach Lowe is incorrect, and there's this talk of, well, maybe next year's not the year. Maybe it's the year after that. Well, eventually it's going to be the year. Let's assume that it's next year, that the Pistons would like to be not horrific to the point where we're bleeding out of our eyes. This is not a move of we want to win next year. This is a move of we think this player can be better in an undetermined amount of time. He's had several seasons already with Golden State, like you guys have said, the gold standard for NBA organizations for a long time, a dynasty with a very cohesive coaching staff and front office that really doesn't move a whole lot. I can think of Mike Brown and Luke Walton moving on, but for the most part, those guys stick together. Bob Myers has been there for a long time. It's a stable organization, and they could not figure out James Wiseman. So that's fine. He's a project player, but project player doesn't add up to why are you trading a player who could help you next year in Saddiq? Maybe it's limited. He's not going to give you the same production as Bojan Bogdanovic, but he's more of a win now player than James Wiseman is. Where is you couldn't get a win now player or a pick or something tangible that you can use this year or next year for Saddiq Bey? There was nothing that exists. I find it hard to believe. I mean, shoot. The Cavs, I know for a fact, would have given up Karis LeVert and a second-round pick for Saddiq Bey. Guaranteed. I'm sure that they would have loved that 2.5 months ago. It's not a win-now move. If they're trying to win next year, so they don't trade Bojan Bogdanovic, which is smart, good. They don't trade Alec Burks. Smart, good. Those are players who are going to help you next year. Great. Those are win next year moves. That's what we wanted to see. But then they trade Saddiq Bey for a not win now player. That throws everything off. I mean, what are you hoping to get out of James Wiseman? Are you hoping to get the center of the future? I thought you already had that in Jalen Duren. So, I mean, it certainly looks like it. He's younger. He's better. He's shown a lot more in the NBA than James Wiseman already has, significantly more. He looks like the center of the future. What is the point? It's not a win now or in the short term kind of move. We don't think that James Wiseman's going to come in next year and be a world beater all of a sudden as a stretch four. I just don't understand the line of thinking of, I mean, maybe Zach Lowe is full of it and the Pistons aren't going to be a competitive team. That's not the goal next year, but I think it should probably be the goal. And we've probably heard enough stuff floating around the league that's kind of how it is. I mean, Tom Gores is not a guy who's going to sit and watch this team be horrible forever. Eventually he's going to want to do something. He did with Blake Griffin, forcing the hand and moving all of those picks and all of those players just to squeak into the playoffs. So eventually, you know, there's going to be a comeuppance of we need to make the playoffs, or at least be damn near close to making the playoffs. And you moved farther away from that with this trade.
Next year is the year, though, and it's not just Zach Lowe saying it. The local media, the beat guys, have said that the next year, 2023, 2024, is the year the Pistons have been planning for. Is the year that they're saying we have to get to the playoffs. That's the year they're going to start building the team. That's the year they're going to get there. That's when they're going to be competitive. So let's not let that narrative all of a sudden get flipped and say it was never really a year, because we've been now being told that for multiple years, dating back to last offseason, that maybe not a ton of moves this offseason because it's going to be the year after. That's when they're building the team to go to the playoffs that following season. So that's been said, and I don't want that script to be flipped and the story to be spun once next year the Pistons are again at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, because this team has maybe 5 NBA players on it right now that are worthwhile in terms of, you can trust on them to be a part of your team next year. Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, and then it's Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks, who just spent literally their entire first half of a season with Detroit in trade rumors from the minute they got to the team. The minute they were announced as part of a deal to come to the Detroit Pistons, they were in trade rumors to be moved to another team literally ever since. So you have to imagine that's going to continue into the offseason. So you have those 5 guys, and then after that, it's Killian Hayes and Isaiah Stewart. Neither guy who's really shown that they're going to be NBA players that are going to contribute to winning long term. You have Corey Joseph, Rodney McGruder, Hamidou Diallo, Nerlens Noel. All guys that probably really shouldn't be on this team. And then you have, those other miscellaneous guys. Marvin Bagley, who extended. Isaiah Livers, who still kind of got to prove that he belongs on a team. And Wiseman,
by the way, has a huge fan in Troy Weaver.
Huge fan. We've been hearing about it.
Yeah.
We've been hearing about it. He can't stay on the court, hasn't made a huge impact when he's on the court. And no disrespect, I like Isaiah Livers. I think he can be good, but he just hasn't stayed on the court. And when he's been in, still hasn't made a significant impact to the point where anyone should really be huge fans of that guy, but whatever. So you look
the numbers.
If this team's going to make the playoffs next year, how the hell are they getting there? Because this roster is so far from being a playoff team that I just can't imagine having that mindset and having that supposed plan years ago that this upcoming season was going to be the year that they made the playoffs. It was going to be the year the team was ready to make the playoffs. But, 6 months away, 7 months away from the start of next season, your roster is so far away. Go look at the Eastern Conference, even with all the moves that have been made. Find me 17, go find me 5-6 teams that the Pistons are going to be better than next year. Go find me them. And let's not forget that Orlando, who's got a much better foundation, a much better roster than Detroit, is going to be in the same spot this offseason with another pick, cap space, and internal development to move forward with. So
yeah, and they'll actually have wings on the roster.
Tell me how that plan's going to work, because it's not.
Huh?
And we're going to be in the same position next year having this same discussion.
Right. Well, we're getting a lot of practice at it.
No, I mean, it's just like, I mean, really, like I mean, Aaron, Mike, do you guys have any other like option other than paying $30 million plus for one of like Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Grant, or God forbid, Kyle Kuzma? Like, how do you fix the wing situation on this roster? I have no answers. I have nothing.
We're going to set a trend, wingless basketball, all guards and bigs.
I mean, if Troy Weaver really wanted to go big, why didn't he just draft Evan Mobley instead of Cade Cunningham a couple years ago? Fair point, right? I mean, if he really wanted to go that big.
I do not know.
I'm just saying. Supposedly he was a fan of him too. So if he really wanted to go this big and build a roster with two bigs, should have just went with Evan Mobley in the long run, I guess.
Well, and then also it doesn't. And then also let's also. What if the Pistons do get the number 1 pick? Who are they taking with their number 1 overall pick? Victor Wembanyama.
We all know who they're going to be taking.
Who's a big man. So, like, now you're also putting yourself in a position where if you do take him, like, what are you doing there? Like, what's the solution? You are going to have five big men on your roster?
Yes, but
where is the roster construction?
If they get Wemby, everyone's going to forget about this trade. A lot of average NBA fans are going to forget this trade. I mean,
yes,
just scroll through Twitter for like 10 minutes and the response to people, saying, well, of course, why won't they start James Wiseman? Why wouldn't they? It's going to get them closer to Victor Wembanyama. The Pistons were already headed down that pathway. Also, what if they don't get Wemby? What if they end up with the 4th overall pick?
You mean a 14% chance isn't a good enough reason to base all of your decision-making off of? You're telling me that?
They're just going to have the 4th overall pick and a bunch of cap space.
It's really funny because for now 2 years now, we've basically been like, could Cade play the 3? Maybe he could play. He's going to have to play the 3 next year.
Yeah, there might not be any other option.
I mean, what do they have? Genuinely, guys, if they're not getting a wing in free agency, where are they finding a wing? Where are they finding a wing?
I don't know. I don't know. And I'm not too crazy about overpaying for Jeremy Grant or Harrison Barnes either.
No. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, it's like, look, if you don't sign one of those guys, well, then you're looking at a failure of an offseason and a really bad record again next year. If you do sign one of those guys, well, then the only way you can compete for a playoff spot is by wildly overpaying Jeremy Grant or Kyle Kuzma or Harrison Barnes. And that in and of itself should be an indictment of the front office, right? Like, if that's the move you have to make to even put yourself into position to make the playoffs. We're not talking about taking a good team and putting it over the top. That's when you can justify giving up 3 first-rounders for Drew Holiday. That's what you can do. This you cannot justify. So for me, yeah, I think it's an indictment regardless of whether they get one of those guys in the offseason, because the fact of the matter is you've had 3 years and your wing situation is basically just as bad as it was when you first came in. So, yeah, I mean, boy, I'm running out of things to say here because it's just like, I'm just shaking my head. It's just basically an elongated shaking my head.
We have about 36 games to see what James Wiseman has this season before the Pistons season officially ends, and we'll get into draft talk. Even though, I mean, to many people, it seems like it's going to be top 2 pick or bust. Even if you get Scoot, I mean, you're going to have another problem with all of the guards that you have. I mean, unless you do play Cade at the 3, which maybe we're hurtling toward that like a meteor is heading towards Earth. But yeah, a really puzzling move. Really don't get it. A really strange deadline. A lot of players going back to their previous teams. Some teams not making any moves. Toronto's for some reason going to buy in and try to make the playoffs this year. The Thunder were continuing to sell off players to get picks. Just a really bizarre deadline. I think this trade probably is the most bizarre out of all of them, though. I think every other trade had some semblance of, oh, this makes sense. Even, Bones Highland going to the Clippers, which I think is super weird. And Reggie Jackson being traded for Plum Dog Millionaire, which is just piston on piston crime. Super, super bizarre, but this one I think takes the cake. Any last minute thoughts? We're going to talk about this next week, I'm sure, and we're going to analyze every James Wiseman game from here on out. But any last thoughts here before we wrap up this edition of the podcast?
Yeah. I'm going to try to end on a positive note and say good decision not to trade Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks. That was pleasant surprise because the last day or so it felt like the dam was going to break and Bogdanovic was going to get moved to Los Angeles. So props to the Pistons for not trading one of their very, very few actually good players.
Yeah, I was gonna say good luck making the playoffs next year if you trade away 2 of your 5 best players on your roster right now. Like,
you trade away
can you imagine?
66% of your wings.
Oh, 0 wing lineup. Yeah, I mean, look, this is a really disappointing trade. On a just asset for asset basis, it doesn't seem like a lot, but in a big term picture, I think that this says a lot of really worrisome things about the GM, about the organization, about the roster, and where they're heading, what they're going to need in order to get to where they say they're trying to go. I think it's a very, very worrisome trade deadline for Detroit. It's not, and I want to clarify that again, it's not a doomsday scenario. They're not doomed now. Like, Saddiq Bey was not the make or break factor in the Pistons' long-term success. But what it does tell you is that, where the organization is not on the same page as a lot of other people who follow the league. And I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. That's all I have to say. So, yeah.
I hope that you're wrong, too. And there's a chance that we're all wrong. But,
yeah. Well, it's just like, it's frustrating, too, because you have all these people, y'all can't stomach a rebuild. You know what I mean? Like, I can stomach a rebuild, but I need to know what you're building. All I can see right now is a construction site. There's a bunch of guys sawing beams. They're putting up, they're putting up a basketball court one week, and then they're digging it out to put in a pool the next week. I'm just wondering what the hell I'm looking at here. That's really my question. I'm fine with a rebuild, but I have to know what the hell you're doing. And this move makes me go, I don't know what the hell you're doing, Troy Weaver. So,
well, that's an interesting way to end the podcast. I hope that we'll get an answer a little bit throughout the season, at least, of seeing what James Wiseman looks like. I didn't even know if he was healthy enough to play. So it appears he is.
Can I say one more thing?
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
A message to all our listeners. Let us know. I want to know how everyone else feels because I think it's pretty split.
Yes.
I want you to tell us if you're listening on YouTube, comment under the video. Tell us how you feel about the trade. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere else, tweet us. Tweet us at Palace of Pistons, at A Johnson NBA, at Blade Cunningham. Mike, yours is at Anguilano
M22. Yeah.
Okay, so at Anguilano M22. Like, tell us how you feel. I want to know because maybe we're on the opposite side and everyone else
right,
high-low trade, but I'm not seeing it, but I definitely want to know what you guys think, so definitely tell us. I know some of you have already told us as we've been talking throughout the show in the YouTube comments, so excited to see what all of our listeners have to think about this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm anticipating a pretty good split. I think a lot of people are going to agree with us on the trade, but disagree with us on Troy. So yeah, again, and we always welcome like respectful comments. We'll try and treat all you guys with respect as well. Like we love the Pistons and we love talking about it. And even if we seem like we're getting up in arms sometimes, it's just because we're passionate.
Right.
It is sports at the end of the day. So,
but if you do post a comment about Steve Blake, Aaron will block you. So just know that right out of the gate.
GG to Tome only. That's all I want to see.
That's perfectly fine. That's
Good.
perfectly fine. So
I'll allow it.
Okay. That's going to do it for this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, part of the Believe Network. Thank you so much for joining us. And yes, we love the interaction. So please feel free, find us on Twitter, comment on YouTube. And, we always love that feedback. We always love when fans or listeners interact, even if it is to call us completely off base, which I'm sure that we'll get a little bit. So for my co-host, Aaron Johnson, Jasper Apollonia, I am Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, and we will see you all next time.